Likewise with cities like LA or with cities like Miami. In LA, people that come from Central America complain all the time that they are not called Latinos, they are called Mexicans. The term in LA for a Latino is a Mexican, and a Nicaraguan is a Mexican, and a Salvadoran is a Mexican, and so is a Guatemalan, simply because everybody is Mexican, so they have to be as well in the eyes of those that are not Latinos. And in Miami, even though Cuba, again, doesn't have as a capital Havana, but it has as its capital, certainly in terms of money, Miami, the number of Brazilians and the number of Colombians and Venezuelans is such that put all of them together are more in number than the Cubans. The map is changing. And that map pushes us to think anew many of the paradigms that we have had as Latinos. You know, in Mexico, we were all willy-nilly, more or less, Mexicans. And in Peru, we were all more or less Peruvians. But here, this nation of Latino land has become a sum of parts. And I share the same feature than somebody from Puerto Rico or from Cuba. How many Puerto Ricans did I meet in Mexico before coming to the United States in 1985? I've tried to think hard. Maybe 1, 2 disoriented tourists in La Zona Rosa looking for instructions, and I was equally lost there and pretended to have some idea of where they should go. It was only when I arrived to New York City that I realized that they spoke Spanish, I spoke Spanish, and we were part of the same group. And all of a sudden, they were ceasing to be Puerto Rican, and I was ceasing to be Mexican, and we were becoming Latino. This new category that was neither theirs nor mine, but ours. A chimera, an abstraction that very often makes us different from Santo Domingo and all the sands that you can connect in our major cities. Pluralism is something that we not often have been able to handle in our own countries of citizenship. Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. Pluralism is the big challenge that we have as Latinos in this country. Pluralism because we want others to recognize us for who we are, for who we can be, and to allow us to prove ourselves the way other groups have proved themselves. But pluralism also because within our community there are differences. Are we able to allow others to prove themselves, to allow to show their talents in lower class? There are Latinos that have come to this country through the airports in fancy jets. There are Latinos who have come to this country without ever having been close to an airplane. There are Latinos that have come to this country because they wanted to have a better opportunity in terms of freedom of expression, political engagement, and profession. I am one of them. I thought that it would be better to come to the United States and become a writer where the idea of the writer was one that was more dynamic, more open and more engaged than in Latin America. But there are also Latinos that have come to this country because they don't have enough money, because they don't have a future for their own children. And they have come here the way other immigrant groups have come here, simply looking for that very evasive, very distant, very utopian concept, the American dream. Again, utopia in Greek, there is no such place. But race within the Latino community. We are white Caucasian. We are black. Black that resulted from the slave trade to the Dominican Republic, to Puerto Rico, to Cuba, to Venezuela, to Colombia, particularly the Caribbean basin and the northern part of South America. We are mulattoes, meaning the mixture of those original slaves with the Creole population. We're Indians, people that come from pre-Columbian tribes, descendants of them, that had different colored skins, all of them. The Guarani in Paraguay, very different, and in Bolivia, very different from the Maya in Guatemala or Mexico, or from the Quechua in Peru and in other parts of the Andean region. The color of indigenismo, of the Indian, is what? The color of brown, the color of gray. Is it a color? Was it a color when the Spaniards first arrived? It certainly was a color, because the myth among the Nahuatl, among the Aztecs, was that a king would arrive from overseas with a big beard, wearing metal clothes, and he would be the color of the sun. And just as they were thinking of that myth, the Aztecs, Moctezuma and Cuauhtémoc, just at that moment, you have to be in the right time, at the right time, in the right place. Hernán Cortés arrives, dressed in armor, with his beard, and the color of the sun, maybe. Certainly not the color of the moon or of the color of night. And then there's the issue of immigration to Latin America, but not from. There are Asians in Latin America. There are Italians in Latin America. There are Jews, there are Germans, there are French. There are Mexicans in Argentina and Argentines in Mexico. We are a big soup of possibilities. And we are restless, constantly on the move, realizing that we have to look for better opportunities. And sometimes those opportunities are within our space, and sometimes, often, they are beyond our space. We don't talk about race the way Americans talk about race. Americans talk about race as if it was some sort of guilt trip. They talk about race as if it is a legacy that can be overcome, without realizing that race marks you in many ways forever, and that we better recognize what race is. If you're white, you're in the upper class, and that is automatic. An immigrant from Italy arriving in Argentina automatically has the benefit of the color of his skin or of her skin. Likewise in Brazil, likewise in Venezuela. Whiteness in Latin America is also power. Blackness might mean a connection with a deeper part of what our country is, our folklore, our religion, but it might be a much more complex issue when it comes to access to the circles that control, that run the country. I have been trying to think for a long time how we became brown. Where did this concept of brownness originate? Well, brown is the color of tobacco, and brown is the color of coffee. Two ingredients, two aspects, two protagonists in our life.